Hello, students. Welcome back to our next lesson on ecology. If you recall, yesterday we went over a few key terms in ecology and talked about the ecosystem and the biotic and abiotic parts working together in that ecosystem. We talked about population and community and so forth. Well, today we're going to take it a step further and we're going to get a little bit more energetic because today we are going to be discussing how energy flows through the ecosystem and how it relates to ecology. So let's talk about energy flow today, and let's begin with some pictures, shall we? We shall. Here we have a picture, as you can see, of the beautiful sunshine. You see, on planet Earth, not all ecosystems, but most ecosystems on planet Earth are dependent upon the sun as the primary source of energy. Now, there are those ecosystems in the depths of the ocean, down on the bottom of the ocean floor where the sun don't shine, where there are hydrothermal vents like little mini volcanoes erupting on the bottom of the ocean, adding energy in the form of heat as well as chemicals. There's a whole ecosystem that exists in places where it is completely dark and absent or devoid of any sunshine. But by and large, if you live on the surface of the earth like we do, the primary source of energy is, in fact, the sun. And the sun, as it shines on Earth, not only produces heat energy, but also light energy. And it's that light energy that is tapped into by our first organism here in our energy flow diagram. And that organism includes all of the photosynthetic plants on planet Earth. Not just cute little flowers, but trees and also one-celled organisms that undergo photosynthesis. But in the example that we're going to go through here right now, let's just think of a plant on the surface of the earth. Now, as this plant lives, it is taking the energy from the sun and changing that energy into chemical energy through the process of photosynthesis. And through photosynthesis, these plants on the surface of the earth take sunlight energy combined with carbon dioxide and water and change that into sugar, change that into chemical energy. And animals like you and I, we are dependent upon that source of chemical energy to keep us going. We call it food. Any animal that exists on the earth is dependent upon that chemical energy that comes from the sun, but is transformed by plants. So in our friendly little diagram, we have a very hungry caterpillar. And this very hungry caterpillar will consume the plant in order to obtain the energy that the plant transformed from the sun. But the energy flow doesn't end here because, as you can imagine, as we follow the energy flow from the sun to the plant to the cute little hungry caterpillar, that hungry caterpillar is a tasty morsel of food for other organisms like our hungry little chicken. And that hungry little chicken will consume the energy from the caterpillar that got the energy from the plant, etc., etc. Now, who doesn't like some Kentucky Fried Chicken? Yum, yum. But in nature, there are other predators to chickens as well, like the fox. By the way, what does the fox say? All right, the fox in this case, and by the way, I used to raise chickens. I used to have a flock of a couple dozen chickens. It was a profitable business, you might say, because I made a little bit of money off of it. I called my business Hens Hens. But anyway, there was one time that I forgot to close the chicken coop at night, and a fox came into the hen house, and that was the end of my business because the fox had a feast all night long. In fact, I think the fox invited his family of fox friends to come and consume my 24 chickens, and it was a royal mess the next morning, let me tell you. But hey, the fox is not without predators either, because hey, bears, if they're hungry enough, could go after a fox. So that cute little teddy bear could consume the fox in order to get the energy that fox obtained from the chicken, that the chicken obtained from the caterpillar, that the caterpillar obtained from the plant, that the plant got from the sun. Okay, you see how this chain of events evolves. Now, I don't know about you, but I've seen some really cool rugs made from bear fur. Now, I've never hunted a bear, but uh, I did grow up with a teddy bear. And so, whether you are hunting a bear for its fur, for its meat, or for a cute little teddy bear, people do hunt bears. But let's imagine you are a hungry hunter, and instead of making a teddy bear, well, you could still make a teddy bear out of its fur, but you want to consume the meat. You're getting the energy that bear obtained from the fox, that the fox obtained from the chicken, that the chicken got from the caterpillar, that the caterpillar got from the plant, and the plant got from the sun. Do you see how the energy can flow through an ecosystem? Now, eventually, we die. We all die. All living things will one day die. In fact, that's almost the definition of life. Life has a birth and a death. There is an end to this physical life of ours. I know, what a morbid thought, right? Well, in the context of energy flow in the environment, it does describe the circle of life. Because when once an organism dies, it will be fed upon by a whole host of decomposers that will turn all of the physical material of our bodies, whether we're talking about plants or people, eventually we're decomposed into soil again, upon which plants will grow, and the cycle repeats itself. In order for this all to work, energy has to get from one organism to another organism. And so we're going to expand upon this energy flow, taking it from the pictures to actual words. So let's begin with a group of organisms called producers. Producers, which include plants and plant like protists. We'll learn more about protists in life science, but for the time being, they are one celled organisms. And some of these one celled organisms have characteristics of plants, meaning they have chlorophyll and they undergo photosynthesis. But producers, whether it's one cell or multicellular, producers will take energy from the sun and change it into chemical energy. And when we say chemical energy in the environment, we're really talking about food. And the most basic form of food is sugar, glucose. Glucose is nature's chemical energy powerhouse. All organisms that live on Earth have to take in some form of chemical energy. And by and large, in most cases, that is a form of glucose. It can be more complex than that, but That's basically the idea. So plants, which are types of producers, change that sunlight energy into chemical energy, which we also call food, which we like to eat because we are consumers. Consumers are any organism that changes the chemical energy, namely food, into kinetic energy. Kinetic energy is another word for energy of motion. So, moving around, whether it's blood coursing through your veins and arteries from your heart beating and your lungs pumping to you actually moving physically from one place to another. All living things move, even plants move. It's a form of kinetic energy. And consumers, in order for this to happen, they have to consume other organisms. I know it may sound ghoulish to some of you, but we as consumers, as cool as it would be, we just can't take our hand and stick it out the window on a sunny day and fill our bellies with sun energy. As cool as that might be, we, because we're consumers, we are not producers. We are not organisms that have chlorophyll in our bodies to make food from sunlight. So we have to consume something. And whether we're consuming plants directly or we're consuming other organisms that fed upon plants, we have to take in that energy that ultimately comes from the sun. So we've got to consume other organisms. So there are different kinds of consumers. Primary consumers are also known as herbivores. You may have heard of an herbivore before. An herbivore is simply an organism that eats only, that's right, plants. A plant eater is an herbivore, and herbivores are considered primary consumers because they eat plants directly. Not all consumers are primary consumers, however. Some consumers, like us, are secondary consumers because we not only eat plants directly, but we also eat other organisms that eat plants themselves. Carnivores or omnivores are considered secondary consumers. Now, you may know what a carnivore is. A carnivore is an organism that eats meat. An omnivore, which humans tend to be, omnivores, like bears, omnivores are organisms that eat pretty much anything. Omni means all. Omnivore means an organism that eats both plants and animals. I have to admit, I like a good steak, so you could call me a carnivore, but I like with my steak a good salad. You could call me an herbivore. But since I eat both plants and animals, call me omnivore. I am an omnivore. And by the way, even though you might choose not to consume animals and call yourself a vegetarian, your digestive system is still human, and the human digestive system is geared toward being an omnivore. All right, so let's continue. So, if you're not a producer and you're not a consumer, what could you be? You could be a decomposer. A decomposer is an organism that recycles the remains of other organisms. Generally, we think of bacteria when we think of decomposers, but they could be fungus as well. There's a whole host of organisms that are involved in recycling the remains of other organisms. Some people classify scavengers, such as turkey vultures, as a type of decomposer, ripping apart the remains of a dead organism and restoring them to a recycled material. So here we have the energy flow from the sun through producers, both primary and secondary. Through producers, the plants, to consumers, both primary and secondary, to decomposers. Now, we can illustrate this energy flow in a graphical way using what's called an energy flow pyramid. And this is a very important diagram in the study of ecology because it shows us something very important, which I'll make mention of when we finish the diagram. You see, at the bottom of our pyramid, we have the largest group called the producers. And in this energy flow pyramid, the energy flow is going to be from the base to the top of the pyramid. In fact, I'll talk a little bit about it as we fill in this diagram. You see, it takes a lot of producers. It takes a lot of plants to support a population of consumers, starting with the primary consumers. And as we move up the energy flow pyramid, the population of the group gets smaller, as does the amount of energy left. Because in nature, there's nothing that's 100% efficient. There's always some loss of energy. And that loss of energy due to a lack of efficiency means that as we go from one level to the next level, some energy is always lost. That's why it takes a lot more producers to support a smaller population of primary consumers. And likewise, the secondary consumers, the population size is much smaller yet because it takes more of the primary consumers and the producers to support that population of secondary consumers. Why? Because there's less energy available. Look at the shape of the pyramid. If you look at the width of the pyramid as the amount of energy available, the higher we go in the pyramid, the narrower the pyramid gets, illustrating a reduction in the amount of energy available for the next level. Brings us to the very top, the decomposers. They are dependent upon the little amount of energy that remains after energy has flowed from bottom to top. And once the decomposers get on board, well, the raw materials are then restored to the soil, basically, that the producers grow upon in order to allow that energy to travel up the pyramid once again. So there is a flow of energy from one group of organisms to another, and we call this flow of energy a food chain. A food chain is the transfer of energy from one organism to another. We saw that illustrated with the energy flow pyramid in terms of energy, but now we're going to look at it from the context of the organism or from the perspective of the organism itself. So a food chain is the transfer of energy from one organism to another. And it always reminds me of a song. I know an old lady who swallowed a fly. I don't know why she swallowed a fly. Perhaps she'll die. How many of you know this song? If you do, sing it with me. I know an old lady who swallowed a spider that wriggled and giggled and tickled inside her. She swallowed the spider to catch the fly. I don't know why she swallowed the fly. I guess she'll die. I know an old lady who swallowed a bird. She swallowed the bird to catch the spider that wriggled and giggled and tickled inside her. She swallowed the spider to catch the fly. I don't know why she swallowed the fly. Perhaps she'll die. And if you know the song, you know it goes on to larger and larger organisms, which is basically an illustration of a food chain. So here's an example of a food chain. We've got a producer, a plant like a strawberry plant, which is consumed by an herbivore or a primary consumer, a little insect, which is then eaten by an omnivore consumer or a secondary consumer, a mouse, which is then eaten by an owl. The energy flows from one to the other. It takes a larger population of mice to support one owl. It takes an even larger population of insects to support the population of one mouse. And it takes a huge population of plants in order to support the population of insects. And when everything is working fine, hey, it works out great. But in nature, there are always times when food chains get interrupted and funky things happen. Now, let's take this food chain and go a step further. We're going to talk about this thing called a food web. A food web is basically interconnected or overlapping food chains because in nature, you don't have just one food chain and that's it. But there are all of these overlapping food chains. Think of all of the different kinds of producers or plants in your backyard or in the woods behind you. Think about all of the consumers, both primary and secondary consumers that exist in this township. There are a lot of them. There are lots of intertwining or overlapping food chains. I think the best way to explain a food web is with a picture. So here's a picture. Picture's worth 1,000 words. And in this picture, we see a food web. There are more than one producer here. If you look, here we've got a tree, here we've got a grassy area. Both of these would be examples of producers. Now, what's feeding upon the producers? Well, we've got some insects here, some smaller organisms feeding on these producers. This larger tree, we've got other organisms feeding upon them. And then those organisms are fed upon by secondary consumers. And ultimately, we've got the ultimate predator on planet Earth, the hunter, the human hunter. We are basically the apex predator on planet Earth. Yes, on occasion, humans are consumed by sharks or bears, but by and large, we are not the prey. Naturally, we are not the prey of any other organism currently on planet Earth. The dinosaur days have long since passed. So we are the apex hunter, and we could consume all of these things if we wanted to. And based on your culture in the world, you might actually consume a whole host of different kinds of critters. But no matter what organism is feeding on another organism, it's all a matter of energy flow. All consumers, no matter what level, are all dependent upon the chemical energy that is produced by the producers, ultimately from the sun. And again, there are other ecosystems on Earth, like below the ocean, that are dependent on heat energy from the Earth instead of light energy from the sun. Now, we've talked about quite a bit here today, and we're going to call it quits now and get ready for our lab activity for tomorrow. And so for now, I'll say bye-bye.